We read two parshas this week, Chukat and Balak. And in doing so, we catch up with the people of Israel, so we're all in sync in terms of reading the same Torah readings from this week on. Parshat Chukat begins with a proclamation. Zot Chukat HaTorah. This is the ultimate chok, the ultimate law, mitzvah of the Torah, which defies our understanding. And by tradition, we have three types of mitzvot. We break them down into three categories, and they can be understood as follows. Mishpatim, those are those mitzvot and laws which are affirmed by our rational understanding and our judgment. They make sense to us. Not speaking evil about other people, lashon hara, we understand intellectually how that makes the world a better place. We also understand intellectually how that makes me into a better person, someone who's more sensitive to others, someone who's more caring about others. Those are the mishpatim. Edot, which are mitzvot that memorialize events, for example, eating matzah on Pesach, they create memories, spiritual memories within us, spiritual experiences, which also shape our character. The third category is chukim. Chukim are laws and mitzvot that defy our logic and in some ways even contradict or challenge our rational understanding of the world. But what they do is they engrave, and that's what the word chok means. It means to engrave. They mark, they cut into, they reshape, they impact who we are as people in a way that you could almost say bypasses our intellectual understanding and rational acceptance. And therefore they have their own challenges. They're challenging when it comes to us remaining faithful to the Torah in the face of scrutiny from the outside world. And they also challenge us in the sense that we value intellect and we value understanding. And the question is, does my personal understanding, or to put it more specifically, do the limitations of my ability to understand shape and impact and determine my relationship with God? Or is it rather determined by the guidelines and the Torah that God has provided to us out of love, out of concern for us? That's the choice we make when we observe the chok. And hence we have the chok of the Torah, the epitome, which is the burning of the red heifer, which the ashes of which purify us and enable us to heal spiritually from contact with the dead. That's the primary impact of what we call ritual impurity. There's an alienation from God that comes within a person when a person has physical contact with a dead body. Rav Shamshon Hirsch goes into it in great detail. It undermines our sense of being eternal beings. It undermines our sense of beings created in the image of God, and it overly associates us with the rest of the physical world, with the animal kingdom, and with all the other creations that God has made. And we know from the Torah that God breathed life into Adam in the Garden of Eden, differentiating him, differentiating us, differentiating mankind from every other aspect of creation. And death challenges those notions in a way that requires a healing process, a purification, a removal of a blockage between us and God, and that is effectuated through the ashes of a red heifer. Just parenthetically, when I was in Israel in February, my wife and I visited the city of Shiloh, the ancient city of Shiloh, and they are raising several red heifers who qualify under all the conditions listed in the Mishnah, so that once the temple is rebuilt and once we are able to fulfill the entirety of the Torah that God gave to us, then we'll be in a position to use the ashes of one of those heifers to purify ourselves and, in a certain sense, enable us open channels of connection to God, which heretofore, at this present time, are blocked. So all areas, all mitzvot have an impact on our individual human development. They extend our connection to Hashem, and they do so not only through our mind and conscious thinking, but they do so in the totality of our being. And this is the manner in which Hashem created us, and this is the manner in which Hashem interacts with the world. So clearly, this requires an element of trust, and this element of trust goes throughout the history of the Jewish people. What was the first words spoken to Abraham? Lech lecha, go forth to a land I'm not even going to tell you where it is, and it will be better for you. Lech lecha, as Rashi says, for your benefit. Okay, and Rav Asher Weiss gives a beautiful allegory. Rav Asher Weiss says the following: if I put an ad in the paper and says I have a job, and a person applied for the job, and a person said, I want to sign up for the job. Well, don't you want to know what the salary is? Nope, I don't care what the salary is. Don't you want to know what the work entails? Nope, I'm not interested in what the work entails. Rav Asher Weiss, with a smile on his face, says, I would never hire such a person. Who would ever want to be associated with such a person? He says, however, if you think of an extremely accomplished, wealthy, powerful human being reaching out to his child and saying, come, I want you to work for me. And the child were to say, okay, here's my lawyer, let's start negotiating the terms of employment. You'd say, that person has lost his marbles. This is a father. This is the ultimate channel of caring and compassion. Of course, the mother is the ultimate channel of compassion. But this is a parent speaking. Certainly, the parent has nothing up their sleeve. Certainly, it's insulting to the whole relationship for the person to say, oh, you want to offer me a job? Great. Contact my lawyer. I'm sure we could negotiate the details. I'm sure we could ultimately reach an agreement. We'll make a deal, which is the big word in our society today. That's not the case within the confines of a real loving relationship. It's also reflected in the Torah itself. God offered the Torah to all these other nations. The Jewish people singularly, learning from the example of Abraham and Isaac and Sarah and their families. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Building off of their examples, we didn't want to negotiate. We didn't inquire, what is it, God, that you're asking of us? Is it fair? Will the job pay well enough? Will it be work that we're suited to do? We realized here's an opportunity to labor within the house of God throughout history. And such an opportunity is one we're never going to turn down. And we need to understand that outsiders, the nations of the world, can never grasp such a relationship. They can never grasp such a national trust that has spread itself over thousands of years in the interim with unfailing faith. Just listening to a teacher of mine, Rabbi Kinnerick, who passed away at an elderly age, talking about how his parents, he was born in Germany to very affluent, comfortable parents, and he was one of 3 boys, and his father was the laughing stock of the town because he put each of his boys at a young age on the train to go to Poland and study in yeshiva so that they could become imbued and inspired by Torah study. and no one could understand him. You have opportunities in business here. You're in a more sophisticated society. And as he explained in his tribute to his parents so lovingly and so touchingly, he said, my parents, my mother and my father understood that if there was going to be a future, if there was going to be true prosperity, benefit, and goodness, that we needed to spend years in yeshiva learning Torah, studying Torah, valuing Torah, so that we could take that with us throughout our lives. And of course, through an irony of history, those are the only three members of the family that survived, and indeed the only three people from that town that survived. But that's not the proof to the pudding. The proof is the kind of life that Rabbi Kinneret, he should rest in peace, lived. The years and years of teaching and studying, and the great example he showed in running a chesed program in Jerusalem. The many things that he was involved with, no one other than his wife could possibly even know about. But he lived that life, and he expressed in tribute to his parents their utter faith in going against the tide, doing something that appeared irrational to their friends. And their friends were good friends, and their friends were observant Jews in many cases, and their friends cared about their own children also. But their level of depth of saying that God, from the time of Abraham on, has presented us, the Jewish people, with choices, and those choices that we make, the more they're based on trust and faith and desiring connection, and a sense that God does know best. All that's included in this proclamation in chapter 19, sentence 2. This is the chok, this is the decree, this is the supra-rational mitzvah within the Torah. Don't, as Rashi adds the commentary, don't trouble yourself to look into it. Don't frustrate yourself by wanting to feel that I can master this logically as well and make it my own, but rather live according to it, adopt it, adapt to it, understand that it too is going to be transformative in the way you live your life, in the way that in what you're able to become as a human being, and certainly in terms of the manner in which you're going to be able to impact the world around you. The second Torah reading this week is Parshat Balak. And Balak presents to us the challenge of the idolatrous prophet Bilam probing the Jewish people from every vantage point with the goal of cursing us, with the goal of undermining us, with the goal of separating us from our mission in the world. So hence these two Torah readings fit together in that regard, because Rashi warns us at the onset of Chukas that here is a mitzvah for us to wrap our arms around and live according to, which will provide mockery and separation. And now we get Bilam, this prophet, this person who strangely has access to God's prophecy and with whom God communicates with, and yet whose intent is evil and undermining and contrary to the very plans for creation that God has. And very poignantly, in chapter 23, sentence 9, Bilam points out something which concerns us unto this day, and very especially right now. It's on page 864 in the Art Scroll Chumash. Bilam is looking over the Jewish people, and he says, Hein am levadod yishkon, ubagayim lo yitchashav. The sentence reads as this, it's sentence 9. And the way Rashi explains it, which is the translation in the Stone Chumash, from its origins, we see a people who is rock-like. And from the hills I see it benefiting. Behold, it is a nation that will dwell in solitude and not be reckoned among the nations. From its origins, Rashi says it refers to the patriarchs, and the hills refers to the matriarchs of the Jewish people. And really, it refers to all of our ancestors, our own parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, the whole lineage, as much as we may know it. They set an example that is rock-like, an example that, in fact, has endured throughout human history like no other people has endured. And then he proclaims, Hain, which we translate as behold. We're going to deal with that word in a second. We're a nation that dwells in solitude, it dwells alone. We're not to be counted among the nations. What does this mean? Previously, in previous years, I referred to a beautiful account that Menachem Begin, on the Shabbos afternoon of reading this portion, in his office as prime minister, sat together with different Torah scholars and Bible scholars, secular and religious, and they had a whole discussion about the isolation of Israel. And the year was during the Lebanon War and the campaign. It was exactly at the time when Israel was being blamed for a massacre that took place. And they were all reflecting on the idea that in ultimate terms, the Jewish people seemed to have no other nation, no other people, no one to rely on, and how that defied the early predictions of Zionism, which was once we have a nation, we have a physical land. Once we have, as they said, a flag and an airplane with our colors on it, we'll be considered like all the other nations, and anti-Semitism will disappear. And of course, we know in 2026 more profoundly than ever before that that was not to be one of the achievements of us having a state of Israel and return to the land. There's a Midrash Rabbah. It's fanciful, but it really merits our attention. It takes the word Hain, which is a two-letter word, Hey and Nun. Numerically, Hey is 5 and Nun is 50. And here's what the Medrash says, and it has an implication, I think, which will be very meaningful for us. It says, when you look at the letters 1 through 10, every letter has a partner, meaning what? Aleph, 1, and Tes, 9, combine to form 10. 2 combines with 8 to make 10. 3 combines with 7 to make 10. 4 combines with 6 to make 10. So in that sense, each and every letter, except for Hey, except for the 5, has a partner letter that it can join to and create a whole, a unit of 10. Then it moves on to the Nun, the 50 letter. It says the same thing. If I take 10 and 90, it adds up to 100. If I take 20 and 80, it adds up to 100. 30 and 70, 40 and 60. They also have a partner letter, so to speak, that can form into a complete unit of 100. What's the exception? The letter Nun, the letter 50, because it can't combine with any other letter to come up with a whole number like a 10 or 100. Fanciful Medrash. Then the Medrash goes on and says, this is the nature of the Jewish people within creation. We need to accommodate ourselves to the fact that we are given a unique status. And unique status means loneliness. It's not just because it's lonely at the top, so to speak, because we're certainly not at the top often throughout history, or at least it doesn't feel that way. But it's the sense that we have to find a path in life that reflects the values that God has placed upon our shoulders to carry forward. And here's the exciting part of the Medrash. Because the Medrash goes on when it says you're not going to be counted amongst the nations. It says in the same way, you will be lonely throughout human history. In the end of days, when a final judgment comes to the world, And even we don't have to wait till the end of days. When human history, as it has evolved, we've seen one nation after another rise and fall, and disappear, completely disappear. It says the same way that we don't have a partner nation to cling to, we also will escape the general judgment and do escape the overall judgment of the world. What's the dynamic that this medrash is pointing out? Because I dare say that it's the very extent to which we recognize our uniqueness and we embrace our uniqueness, to the extent that we say, yes, there are mitzvot in the Torah which are the objects of scorn. They may seem to make us look ridiculous. They separate us. Yeah, I can't go out to lunch and with everybody else when the opportunity presents itself because I eat different food than they do. And some people explain that that's the source of anti-Semitism, and yet we know that with all the assimilation and all the jettisoning of all these many mitzvahs, we haven't won over the hearts and affections of the world. But God's promise back to us is that in full measure, when we stand for what we represent, when we have the faith and trust in our convictions, just like Rabbi Kinnerik's parents had when they sent those 3 boys east from Germany to Poland, when we do that, God envelops us with a very special protection and looks out for us like no one else. I saw a reference recently. It says that, and I don't have the source in front of me, but when Lot, the nephew of Abraham, brought the angels into his house, 2 angels, to protect them in the city of Sodom, and the people gathered and said, do you have a guest? Do you have a guest? That's against the law here. And he responded and said, I offered them protection. I will defend them. This is how God's attitude, this reflects God's attitude to the Jewish people. To the extent that we can evoke within ourselves a commitment to Judaism, which is based on Naaseh v'nishma, we will fulfill it all. And yes, we will occupy ourselves to think about and understand and the Torah's every aspect and make it our own, so to speak, within the limits of our rational abilities, but we will accept the Torah even beyond that. Pirkei Avot, someone's actions can be greater than their wisdom. What does that mean? This is the example. We can act in a way which supersedes our wisdom, not by being stupid, but by being trusting, by being accepting, by recognizing the fact that the one who, our employer, so to speak, the job that we have in history, comes from our Father in heaven who only wants what's good for us and is only interested in our welfare, in our well-being, and the well-being of the entire creation, and that's on us to maintain. And as we do so, Hashem more than lives up to his side of the bargain and sees to it that we're protected, that our sacrifices are never in vain, although they be considerable, and that we can have a proud heritage and legacy from the past, carrying through to the present and carrying through to the future. And we can therefore offer our children this rock-like stability and guideline for living their lives as well, and knowing that Hashem will do his part and that together it will work itself out for the benefit of all. Please God, as we adopt these ideas, as we accept them, we should see that all aspects of this promise is fulfilled in our own lives, in the lives of our family and friends, and in the lives of the Jewish people, and in the history of mankind.